And I would say, I know some of you have contacted my office, and it was kind of late to get them in the members' folders. If you have a handout, you are welcome to bring those up now and distribute those as you wish. And the order that we're going to do is House Bill 738, Senate Bill 362, and then House Bill 1125. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I know it's a little crazy this time of year. Everybody is supposed to be in 3 committees at one time, including myself. Representative Kenner, what is your number? If you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to open us in prayer. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Let us pray. Father, we thank you that your steadfast love never ceases. Your mercy never comes to an end. They are new every morning, and great is your faithfulness. Let us tap into a wisdom that's beyond ours and do the right thing for all Georgians. And it's in your name we pray. Amen. Amen.
All right. First, to the House and Labor Committee. We're going to start with Representative Hilton, and he's got a substitute for those. And again, because we've come and going so quick, we have passed this bill out, and he requested that it be sent back from rules to us. And so give us the LC number and the substitute and why we need a substitute. Wait, let me get you table mic. Go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got with me LC 520476S. Is that what y'all have?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. This is House Bill 738. It passed out of committee unanimously a couple weeks ago. Since that time, we've talked to the governor's office, Department of Labor, TCSG, and they have advised us that where we had it housed in Department of Labor, it actually ought to be TCSG, which we requested in the sub, but as I'm looking through it here, and maybe somebody in the audience can help me out, it was supposed to change, I believe, line
45.
to TCSG, which has been changed.
So was that the only change in the bill?
I believe so. I was expecting line 33 to be changed as well. It's created within the Department of Labor to TCSG.
Okay.
So I'd be open to an amendment.
Which one, what line?
That'd be line 33.
Okay. So we will fix that at the appropriate time when it's amendments. Does anybody have any questions for the author? We vetted this pretty thoroughly the other day, so I don't know that we'll have much questions. I don't see any blanks passing before we get to the amendments. If someone wants to make a motion on the bill, motion from Chairman Carpenter. Second, Whip Park. At this time, I'll take the amendment and I'll just let the author, since he's got those with LC, restate those two amendments.
Yeah, so it would be, well, it'd be in the subject line of the first paragraph. Ledge Council will do that. So changing on line,
2? Well, no, I guess we can't change the code section. So on line 33, instead of Department of Labor, that would read the same as
line 40.
45. The Technical College System of Georgia shall replace, on line 33, Department of Labor.
Yes, sir.
So really, that's the only amendment,
Yes,
right?
sir. Yep.
Okay. Motion on the amendment.
Move. Second.
All right. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. To the underlying bill, we've already got a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? See how good we get along? You are on to rules
All right.
again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
My bad. Hey, come back.
Oh, no.
What line you on?
There's line 72. The task force is required to consult with the commissioner, but due to workforce issues, they could consult in theory.
This might be more of a question on 72.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
So we need to change that?
Yes, sir. And instead of, yeah, we should change that to Commissioner of TCSG.
So on line 72F, the task force shall consult with the commissioner of, just striking the one word labor and then inserting Technical System of Georgia. It's still a commissioner. Yeah, what number? Go ahead.
So I don't think it's the end of the world if they consult with the commissioner of labor on
It would not, and that's what the discussion was.
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
I'm fine if we.
I mean, I think it's as long as it's. I think the big key was that it's housed in the technical college system, and because they're providing the research and all that stuff. But I mean, I think if we're trying to deal with employment issues, not to consult the commissioner of labor would be a mistake.
Okay, and it is a shall, not a may, so let's leave it as was. That way we've got all our motions, amendments, and passage. You're welcome to leave again.
Well, do we need to insert the task force to consult with the Commissioner of Labor, comma?
Well, it's
TCSG.
not eliminating you discussing it with them. Is that your thought, Mr. Carpenter?
No, I'm fine. Yeah, leave Commissioner of Labor in there. I didn't know if we needed to put comma TCSG, but I mean, it's being housed in CCSG, so
Yeah, discuss that with the Senate. They like to think they've got input on these bills, so if they want to make that change.
all right. I promise not to come back from rules again.
Okay.
Oh, you have no idea. Don't be careful with
All right, you're dismissed again. All right, Senate Bill 362, Senator Hodges, come on up. Tell us what you got.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, House colleagues. It's my first time before your committee. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Colleagues, I bring you today Senate Bill 362. I'm working from LC 540296-EC. This is on behalf of Governor Kemp. This bill creates an implied term for prospective economic development incentive agreements that requires, as a condition of eligibility for those incentives, for employers to protect their employees' privacy and their choice in the union organizing process. By this bill, employers who accept certain state economic development incentives must agree to, number one, they must agree to protect employee privacy and not disseminate employee personal contact information to union organizers without employee consent. And then number two, they must allow employees to vote on the issue of union representation in a secret ballot election unless that option is not available under the law or under existing bargaining agreements. Obviously, folks, the alternative election process, as you know, is for the employer to voluntarily grant recognition rights based on signed union authorization cards. That's a process otherwise known as card check. And card check is a process that may, and I'm going to emphasize the word may be used by organizers to coerce, intimidate, or harass employees publicly to elect to be recognized by a union, even if some of them don't want to be. Now, this bill only applies to companies receiving defined incentives and only at the facility for which incentives are given. This bill, as I said, is prospective. It's in the future. The agreements, this only applies to agreements signed after January 1st, 2025. It does not apply to existing agreements. And it only applies for the duration of the performance period under the incentive agreement. To be clear on a few things about the bill. Number one, the bill does not preempt federal law because this bill does not create any state law cause of action that could conflict with National Labor Relations Board rulings. It only concerns the expenditure of state economic development funds. Furthermore, the bill only targets voluntary actions of companies who agree to accept certain incentives regardless of the outcome of a unionization effort, does not prohibit a company's employees from unionizing, nor require that an employer oppose unionization efforts in any action before the NLRB, nor require that an employee campaign against unionization. Employers are free to agree to hold union elections. However, employers only lose eligibility for state incentives if they decide to skip the secret ballot election when that is available, or to disseminate employee personal information without consent. The bill does not apply to any other union governance matters such as wages, work days, or work hours because those governance matters are controlled by federal law. All that said, the state of Georgia has a very strong interest in how our state incentives are utilized when we seek to attract employers to locate or expand a facility in the #1 state for business. As such, this bill seeks to protect hardworking Georgians' rights in the unionization effort so that each employee is free to vote in private without fear of coercion, intimidation, or harassment. Mr. Chairman, colleagues, I urge your favorable consideration.
Okay. Whip Park.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Senator Hodges, thank you for the presentation of the bill. I'll be honest with you, I do not like it. And I hope you don't mind if I ask you a few questions.
You go right ahead.
So on lines 29 to lines 30, we know that there are, construction projects in particular can have as many as up to 30 subcontractors. Is it not true that enforcement of this language would essentially be nearly impossible and add confusion to business owners who contract with multiple entities? How do you expect the state to enforce this bill, especially with as many subcontractors as there can be?
Well, I disagree with your premise. A project is a project, whether it's undertaken by one company or one company with dozens of subcontractors, and the company that has a responsibility for the project deals with the subcontractors on a day-to-day basis.
Senator Hodges, so then would you be able to help me understand, if a subcontractor violates this legislation, would the overall project or business be at fault and have its state funding revoked, or would the contractor be on the hook?
I don't believe that's the intention of this bill.
I'm sure there are, intentions aside, I think I'm trying to understand the practical effect and implications of this bill, particularly on Georgia businesses, in which, again, I'm concerned if there's not an understanding as to the implications this bill may have with respect to subcontractors and state funding. If I may move on to another area, on lines 34 to 36, under the NLRA, there are two pathways to union recognition: secret ballots and voluntary recognition. If this bill is passed and an employer misses the 2-week window to file for an election, will the state consider this voluntary recognition?
Let's say that again, I'm sorry.
If this bill is passed and an employer misses the 2-week window to file for an election, will the state consider this voluntary recognition?
No, I think all this does is require that if the company that's accepting our state incentives, if their employees want to elect to unionize, that a secret ballot be available to them, if at all possible under the law. That's it.
Senator Hodges, with respect to the issue of preemption, is it not true that SB 362 is preempted by federal law because specifically it eliminates one pathway that's otherwise provided under federal law for employees to choose a bargaining representative?
Representative, I don't think so. I don't think that's the case because basically you're talking about, I can't think of a better way to say this than a deal between consenting adults. You've got a company that wants incentives to either locate a facility or expand a facility. You've got a state that wants to provide those facilities or provide those incentives to affect that facility and the jobs that come with it. And I think those two parties are quite capable of negotiating the terms of that, which in this instance would include the guarantee of a secret ballot.
All due respect, Senator, I appreciate the clarification. However, I don't think it addresses the question that I asked. Federal law, my understanding, is fairly clear with respect to the ability for workers to unionize, in which, again, there are two paths.
Right.
And this bill essentially eliminates one. How is that not preempted?
Let me do this,
Well-
since we've kind of gone back and forth on that. We've got, I know, a lot of experts that are in the room on those, and maybe some of those folks can address that.
Thank you.
27, is that Chairman Carpenter?
Yep. Thank you, Senator. Appreciate you bringing the legislation.
Sure.
Just a quick follow-up, because I was listening to Whip Park a little bit on this issue. The way I'm reading line 40 and 41 says that they cannot require their subcontractors or to engage in the activities that are prohibited. It doesn't say that the subcontractor can't do whatever they want to do.
That's right.
It just says that the company that's subcontracting can't tell them how to operate. And then also, I don't know, have you been here long enough to have a DOT vote?
No,
You
I'm
haven't?
not, no.
Well, just so you know how it works, is you get everybody, the senators and representatives together, and you go in a room and you vote and you do a secret ballot. You know why you do a secret ballot? Because when people have to fill something out, they don't always vote the same. When you've got an individual coming at you, wanting you to sign a card, you're going to sign the card because that's the path of least resistance, and it may not be what you truly want to do. So I appreciate you bringing this legislation. I look forward to the further conversations on it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Representative McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Senator Hodge, I guess, I'm as I look at this, I'm trying to figure out, do you have the percentage of union workers in the state of Georgia?
I do not.
Well, if I told you it was less than 5%,
I would believe you. I don't know differently.
okay. I mean, I guess where I'm going with this is that we're less than 5%, but we're bringing a bill that's looking for something, And when I say looking for, I don't know what it's looking for, but my question is on lines 42, 43, and 44. I guess what Whip Park was saying was, it says that any employee that engages in any activity prohibited by subsection B of this code, section of performance of a project shall repay any and all economic development incentives received over the life of such project. I mean, are you saying that on day 5, on year 5, the last day, if something happens, that I've got to repay all the incentives back?
Representative, the way I understand it, when these deals are cut, there's a memorandum of understanding that is negotiated between the state economic development people and the company involved. And the MOU has a certain term, a term of service, I think they call it. And this bill would hold the employer for that term of service. In other words, the MOU might say that, okay, we're going to give you these incentives, and you're going to employ 500 people, and you're going to do this all within 5 years. So, and it would set out in the MOU the time frame involved, and that would be the time frame that would be covered in this. It wouldn't be in perpetuity.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. I guess what you're saying is you really don't know, or because what I'm reading it says.
No, that's not what I said.
Oh, okay. I know you're correct.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I said that. I'm sorry about that. But what I'm reading on line 42 through 44, it does not say MOU. It does not say. It says that incentives received over the life of such project. It says shall repay. It didn't say may repay. It says shall. And Senator Hodges, shall and may are two different words.
I understand the point that you're making, Representative. But again, these deals are governed by an agreement, and I think the agreement in place would lay out the term of time involved, and that would be the term of time, and that would be, to me, would be the life of the project. In other words, if I tell you that you're gonna give me some tax breaks, and I'm gonna have 1,000 employees within 5 years. Well, within 5, if I don't have 1,000 employees in 5 years, then I'm gonna have to tell you why I don't. And also, if at the end of that term, I would be, if say we didn't vote to unionize in the first 5 years and we did in the 6th, then the term's over, and the the life of the project would be over.
Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna go because I'm reading this on line 43, and it says any and all. And any and all and shall are words that means just exactly what they say. Shall and any is any amount, and all is all amounts. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, not just caution to, make your statement and this is not directed at you, but we've got several people to speak, and so some of these questions might get answered. 26, is that Chairman Bonner?
Thank you. Thank you, Senator, for bringing the bill. Just a couple of clarifications. Does this apply to any of the local or tax benefit, local incentives that a local municipality or county may provide to a project?
No, sir, just state incentives.
Okay. And as I understand the bill, it does not preclude a company from conducting those votes however they wish. It's just if they choose one over the other, then they would be at risk of losing whatever incentives that they were provided at the beginning. Correct.
That is true, but they would know that going in.
Correct. Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. About to say, okay, Whip Park.
Just a quick clarifying question. When we're talking about state economic development, when we're talking about economic development incentives, are we talking purely state dollars? So nothing that the state would otherwise receive from the federal government? And if I may provide an example, I think a few days ago, for example, the Georgia House unanimously passed legislation to receive federal tax dollars to expand rural broadband, but those aren't state dollars; those are federal tax dollars.
Representative, the way I understand this, we're talking about state tax dollars.
So only state.
That's my understanding.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I think that's all we're allowed to do. Okay, that exhausts your questions. Those that have, you got sign up sheet? All right, Brett Hume, and for you and everyone, please tell us your name and who you're with, and if the who you're with isn't obvious, tell us what that means. Hold on. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brad Hume, Southeastern Carpenters. I would just like to explain the process of recognition to help you all make a much better decision, because I'm going to assume the majority are unfamiliar with that process. It begins with workers attempting to organize and be recognized. And once they sign cards, the National Labor Relations Board is petitioned for recognition. At that point in time, the National Labor Relations Board controls everything. Well, almost everything. And I say that because they determine first what the bargaining unit will be, what it will consist of, who's in, who's out, who's eligible to vote, who's not. Example, a paper mill. The maintenance department may have decided to sign cards and seek recognition, but not production. The NLRB would then decide of the maintenance department, are foremen in, are they out? Are supervisors in? A lot of that has to do with their job description from the employer. All right, at that point in time, should the employer be unaware, the employer is notified of the worker's intent to seek recognition. The employer then, legally, by National Labor Relations Act, decides which path of recognition on behalf of those workers. Is it card check, as the senator referred to? Is it secret ballot? If they do choose card check, employer says, okay, the majority of workers in my example in the maintenance department Sign cards, let's negotiate. Let's go to the table and talk. Issues, work it out. If they choose the secret ballot path, there's generally 4 to 8 weeks before the actual election is held. And I will submit to you that during those 4 to 8 weeks, and you may hear from later testimony, that's when the employer has the opportunity, as the senator referred to, leverage, intimidate, retaliate, invite fear into the workers to the point where, if you vote the union in, we're going to close shop. So again, the employer has that decision of which path. Now what happens at that point, regardless of which path, if it does go to the election, the workers do the secret ballot piece, okay? But to Representative Carpenter's point, even if the worker signed a card and does not want to join the union for whatever reason, we are a right to work state. They don't have to join, even if the employer recognizes the union. They don't have to pay dues, although they enjoy all the rights that come with the contract. They're not fiscally responsible. Okay, so their rights are not taken away from joining. To Representative Bonner's piece, I would suggest to you that part of this legislation is under the One Georgia Code, which does in fact allow incentives from the state to municipalities. So this could very well be litigated on expenditures through the cities and towns on capital projects. To the piece on the subcontractors, a lot of times in the construction industry, they're on a schedule, but if for some reason these 10 workers for the HVAC company decide they want to get recognition, the employer says, okay, I'm going to recognize you. As I understand the bill, that subcontractor of that employer that received the capital investment is now liable to repay the incentives from the state. Now, I'm certainly not an attorney, but I'm just a working man. But that's the way I read it. I would suggest to you that this is an attempt to protect state incentives. I get that. At the end of the day, that's our money. Our money. But this is a poor example. The governor may want to consider, to be consistent with his remarks in many a forum about benefiting all Georgians, something along the lines of, if you're going to take this incentive, you need to build it with 45% Georgia workers. That's fair, because I can assure you there's not 45% construction Georgia workers on the Hyundai plant as much money as we've given them. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. There was a flight. Was there a question somebody wanted to ask? Okay. Yeah, we got like 12 people. Kennedy Atkins.
Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Kennedy Atkins. I'm with the Georgia Public Policy Foundation and Georgia Policy Impact. Thank you for the honor of addressing you today in support of SB 362, which will protect Georgia workers at companies receiving state taxpayer incentives. In Georgia, we believe that everyone has the right to work free from intimidation, and that decisions about who we choose to represent us, whether public officials or within the workplace, deserve to be made privately without others knowing our selection. This is why we are supporting this legislation with the help of our partners at the Mackinac Center for Public Policy Workers for Opportunity Initiative. They're represented here today by Vinny Vercuccio, who I would like to introduce for some brief remarks.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Vincent Verduccio, and I'm a senior fellow at Workers for Opportunity, a national project of the Mackinac Center, and we seek to protect employees, protect their choice and their First Amendment rights across the country. We support SB 362, and I will tell you what is in the bill and what is not in the bill. You've already heard the great introduction by the senator. This simply ensures the secret ballot in union elections at companies that are taking state economic incentives. You've heard about protecting taxpayers. I would say this is about protecting workers. It's about protecting their choice, their privacy, and their right to decide confidentially, without pressure, without intimidation, that could come from the employer or from the union if they want to be represented and if they want to be organized. What it does not do, it does not affect collective bargaining at all. Workers and companies can still negotiate over wages, hours, working conditions. Anything they can bargain for today, they will be able to bargain for tomorrow, even if this bill is passed. The only difference is that their right to choose whether or not they want to have a union represent them is done at the ballot box. Privately, confidentiality, just like you all run for election, just like we get to vote for Congress or for president, workers should have the right to choose who represents them. Georgia is a right-to-work state. That is correct. No one is forced to join a union, right-to-work state or not. In Georgia, thanks to the right-to-work law, no one is forced to pay a union. But workers under a union contract are forced to accept union representation whether they want it or not. And Representative, the exact numbers in Georgia are 4.6% of Georgians are unionized, 5.4% are represented by a union. Those are current unionized workers. This bill will not affect them at all, except for the other 95+%. They could be open to intimidation and coercion that comes from card check and not protected by the secret ballot. We've heard a lot about how unions can be organized and what the employer's options are. I will not rehash that. Employer, it's their choice to choose card check, their choice to protect their employees via secret ballot. Why would an employer choose card check? Why would an employer choose to give home addresses, personal, private information of their employees? Well, there's a thing called a corporate campaign where unions will go after a company, go after their shareholders, their officers personally, make nasty, disgusting smears on a company to drive away business in order for the company to capitulate and say, fine, we'll recognize you. We'll sign what's known as a neutrality agreement. We'll take away the secret ballot from our workers, and we will give you their private information. When it comes to workers, I can give you documented horror stories, documented at the National Labor Relations Board, of intimidation, coercion. Not all of them come from unions. In fact, one example is that what the NLRB called an overzealous card solicitor, not affiliated with the union, was trying to get a card signed, told the woman that they would slash her car tires, get her children, unless she signed the card. Now, once again, that's not the union, not making allegations. NLRB said it was an overzealous card solicitor that just really liked the union. We've also heard union organizers testify to tactics, testify before Congress to tactics, such as repeated visits to someone's home, pressure, harassment, simply to get them to sign a card. The beauty of the secret ballot is that they can sign that card knowing that then they can make a private decision in the sanctity of the voting booth. I want to talk about some of the myths. We've heard a lot about federal law and preemption. Federal law gives employers the ability to choose card check or secret ballot. We've heard that again and again. It's the employer's choice. What this bill is doing is not saying you have to protect the secret ballot. It's simply saying if you want taxpayer incentives, taxpayer money, then like other requirements, you have to say we are going to protect the secret ballot. That is a big difference between saying you have to do something Or if you want to work with us, if you want our financing, then you have to do this. And I'll give you a couple examples from the union side. There's a thing called labor peace agreements, project labor agreements. Many of them include card check. Cities like San Francisco, New York City, states like Maryland, Minnesota, Connecticut, they require these project labor agreements or labor peace agreements. Many of them require card check. So you have to ask yourselves, if that is legal, if mandating card check for taking state funding, or in some cases, even a state license, if that is not preempted, why is the exact same choice for an employer to protect the secret ballot? How is that not exactly the same? Specifically, the bill says that if federal law, and I'm going to quote from Section 1, B1, if the selection of the collective bargaining representative may instead be conducted through a secret ballot election, and it's referring to federal law. So once again, if federal law says you have to do card check, the bill is not preempted. It says then you'll do card check. Section B1, B2, right after that. Unless otherwise required by state or federal law when it comes to employee privacy. Once again, the bill is written in a way that there is no preemption. That if federal law says you have to do X, Y, or Z, you have to do X, Y, or Z. But it doesn't get to that point because it's Georgia as a market participant. It is Georgia as saying that you can recognize a union via card check if you want to. But if you're taking taxpayer dollars, then you have to protect their rights. When it comes to the subcontractor question, it very clearly says require. If the subcontractor is not getting economic incentives, then the bill doesn't apply to them. What the bill applies to is the larger contract. If that awardee is getting economic incentives, they cannot put something in their contract with their subcontractors to say, you must recognize via secret ballot. And we have numerous examples of those larger contracts, maintenance of membership agreements, saying that, well, we've signed a neutrality agreement with the union. If you want to work with us, whether or not you want to protect the secret ballot, you can't do it. You must recognize the union via card check. So I'm happy to take any questions, happy to give more examples of project labor agreements, labor peace agreements that do require card check as a requirement for state funding or for licenses or for other issues.
Okay, you got a couple of questions,
Yes.
Chairman. Whit Park.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll be honest with you, I do take umbrage with your characterization that, this bill is to protect workers. I would love additional examples, specifically here in Georgia, of workers being intimidated by labor unions or being otherwise forced, because I think that sort of characterization is inappropriate. Second, is it not true that in San Diego Building Trades Council v. Garmin, that case specifically forbids state and local regulation of activity that the NLRA protects, prohibits, or arguably protects or prohibits, in which case even the language you cited, it's still otherwise preempted under this bill?
I believe San Diego does have project labor agreements. I believe that there are union requirements in those project labor agreements. And if you are talking about requires, there is no requirement for card check at a federal level. It is a choice of the employer, card check or secret ballot. There's been numerous attempts at congressional federal legislation to mandate card check. There's been attempts at the National Labor Relations Board to interpret it that way. They could not. As far as protecting workers, I would strongly argue that Giving a worker the right to make a private decision, not out in the open, protects those employees. And that is what this bill is about.
Thank you.
Okay. Representative Marin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say that we have several speakers, Mr. Chairman, and I will say that you put a time limit on each speaker because I guess we have to move on. So I appreciate your time.
Well, that'll
But
be
I
my
suggest
decision. Thank you.
And I will thank the committee for their indulgence. Thank you.
That's all the questions.
Thank you.
David Moskowitz, sorry. Actually know you. Messed up your name.
Maybe they wrote it down incorrectly. Chairman Werkheiser and honorable representatives, thank you for the opportunity to address you today on Senate Bill 362. My name is David Moskowitz, and I am a labor employment attorney by trade. My clients are members of organized labor in Georgia. From my standpoint here today, Senate Bill 362 as written is in complete violation of previous rulings of the National Labor Relations Board concerning card checks. Now, I'm not going to get into all the legal parts of that. My esteemed colleague, Mr. Nick Stanorovich, had written a letter to the representatives on the committee earlier today that I think is a masterful piece in explaining what are the legal problems with this bill. I think it's self-explanatory, but my approach to this is a little bit different, and that comes from my representation of folks within the labor movement, both unions and union members. And my concern is this. I heard Governor Kemp state about how we want to have the best workforce in the state of Georgia, in the country, and especially with the EV community. And here's my concern with this bill, is that this is going to discourage us from having that. And I'll tell you why. There's, right now, in order to get the EV plants operational, it's going to require highly skilled labor. There's no dispute about this, that Georgia's workforce does not currently maintain. The only two ways to create this workforce is either training or to have folks move into the state of Georgia. And as for the former, from the folks that I deal with, we can't train the workforce quick enough. The apprenticeship programs cannot certify individuals to maintain this workforce quick enough and have them properly trained. So this leaves, and the Secretary of Energy came here and testified to this, whether you want to believe her or not, and said that a good deal of this workforce is going to have to move into the state of Georgia. And this is a fact. We're talking 50,000 jobs and more. We don't have it. And I will say this, the members I represent, and you'll hear this from other building trade officers here today, tell you these skilled union members are not going to move into the state of Georgia because they are going to be discouraged from doing so if you have something like Senate Bill 362. These are highly trained union workers coming from out of state, and they're not going to take the jobs. They'll go somewhere else. And if the Georgia legislature wants to ignore this problem and say, so what, we'll just either go with unskilled labor or non-union skilled labor, then have at it, because I truly think you're putting employers that have to hire these folks in a really bad position. Now, I'm going to say this in closing. I have been a board member to the Georgia Labor Management Board for many years now. And I sit on this board with representatives from the Southern Company, from Georgia Power, from AT&T, the bakeries, you name it. And I can assure you that those folks from management who sit on this labor management board will tell you that this is not good for the state of Georgia. And these are folks that are employers. And we can send a message, yeah, Georgia is anti-union. We already know that. Representative McLean has said we're 5%, just under 5% of organized labor in Georgia. So the point is, why do we even need this? It's not like, we're rampant with union members and organizing. It's just not necessary. It's a problem without a solution. So all I will say is I strongly urge this esteemed body to not move this bill forward, and I ask you to do this for the betterment of this state that I care about. Thank you.
Hold on a second. Chairman Bonner.
Hey, thank you for that testimony. You'd mentioned some of those larger companies. Are, to your knowledge, are any of those companies a part of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce?
I would assume Georgia Power has some members in the chamber. I mean,
I just asked because just to reference the letter in support of the bill from the Georgia Chamber. So just wanted to make sure we were kind of clear on that. Thank you, though.
I can't speak for them, and I don't know what involvement they had in the writing of that letter, but I will just say that my fellow board members that are from management with Georgia Power or the other companies that I mentioned, I would think that this would create problems for them.
Okay. Chairman Carpenter.
Thank you, Chairman. Just real quick, you don't happen to have the statistics based on when there's a union election and one is secret ballot and one is just card signing? Do you have the statistics on the success rate of those elections?
I think you'll hear testimony from someone else other than that. I can't give you those, but I do think there's someone who's going to talk about that
awesome.
later.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
James Williams.
Good afternoon, everyone. Chairman Werkheiser, committee, thank you for allowing me to testify. My name is James Williams. I'm the Secretary-Treasurer of the Georgia AFL-CIO. We represent over 60 unions in the state of Georgia, and one of the things we'd like to say is we fight for all working families in the state of Georgia. So a few things I'd like to debunk. One of the main ones is intimidation tactics used by labor organizations. I've been an organizer for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers for a long time. One of the last organizing campaigns I worked on with them was Atlanta Gaslight, and I can tell you, in my experience and the experience of my colleagues, we don't use intimidation tactics. The gentleman here talked about an intimidation tactic, but that wasn't a union representative, that was a worker, and we can't control what the workers are doing on those campaigns. We do have meetings where we talk to the workforce on how to organize, and we cover the NLRA and the NLRB and what is a violation and what is not a violation. If we're found in violation of the NLRB, the election's gone, the organizing campaign is gone, and we could be fined by the NLRB for doing that. So the same thing does apply to the businesses. But just in my experience, it's the old adage, you catch more flies with honey than you will with vinegar. So this is similar to an election for public office. Do you all just knock on the person's door one time? Do you do multiple sweeps? Is that considered harassment if you go to the same door more than 2 times to see if you can get their vote when you're running for office? No. In some election cycles, my door's been knocked on 4 to 5 times a day by different organizations. I don't consider that harassment. Some people do. Another thing that the gentleman mentioned when he brought up San Francisco and Minnesota and now Georgia is project labor agreements. Project labor agreements with state funding and municipal funding is already on the books in Georgia as a violation. You cannot have project labor agreements on state-funded or municipal-funded projects in the state of Georgia. So California, sure. Minnesota, sure, but this is Georgia, and this isn't how Georgia does things. Another thing that I'd like to discuss is unfair labor practices. So if there's an organizing campaign and it goes to an election, you have what's called unfair labor practices or violations of the NLRA on that. In 2021 to 2022, there was a 19% increase in unfair labor practice charges with the NLRB on secret ballot elections. And from 2022 to 2023, it increased an additional 10% of unfair labor practices that were filed with the National Labor Relations Board. And there was a study done by the Economic Policy Institute. This goes back to 2016 and 2017. The gentleman brought back a case from 2011, and one of them was 2009, so I think I can go back to 2016. 41.5% of union elections in the 2016-2017 years, the companies were found with unfair labor practices in 41.5%. So they were using things like firings and terminations. 19.9% of those secret ballot elections, unfair labor practices were filed, and they were found guilty by the NLRB for terminating people who were using union activities. Coercion, threats, and retaliation. Again, this one's 29.2%. Of those secret ballot elections that big bad labor is intimidating people on, there aren't any on us. It's on the companies. 29.2% of companies were found using coercion, threats, and retaliation against workers trying to organize. And this is during secret ballot elections. Disciplinary firings and charges and work terms, it's another 29% of that. And then it gets even worse when you get to larger companies. The Economic Policy Institute found through Freedom of Information requests and other requests for information from the National Labor Relations Board that companies involving more than 60 employees and union organizing efforts involving more than 60 employers, I said 29.9, that jumps up to 54% of unfair labor practice violations that the NLRB upheld as the company at fault. And so I just wanted to make sure that I debunk, and I also want to debunk something the person said there that, they're the employees required to be represented by that union. That's a misnomer. That person's not paying dues, they're not paying assessments, they're not paying any of the salaries or anything for the union representatives. But that union representative is required by federal law to represent that worker in grievance procedures. That union representative is required by law to negotiate in good faith with the employers on contracts, and those people that choose not to join a union that are still represented by that union garner all the benefits and wages, benefits, safety, and other policies that that union has negotiated on their behalf. Georgia's been right to work since 1947. You can have an election, you can have card check, you can have any way you want to under the sun. If you don't want to be a union member in Georgia, you do not have to be a union member in Georgia. So again, following up what Mr. Moskowitz said earlier, we have a solution in search of a problem. I don't see a problem. We're less than 5% of the workforce in the state of Georgia. But the things that we do and what we do very well, I don't know if y'all remember Plant Vogtle, units 3 and 4 being built. Across the river in Carolina, there was 2 reactors being built over there. Westinghouse went bankrupt. The project was in the air. Labor unions, along with Georgia Power and the Public Service Commission, got together and found a way to continue that project. And because of the efforts of labor unions and they're willing to negotiate and work with all parties, that plant was able to get those 2 units up and running and online. So there's a lot of misinformation out there about union tactics. This isn't the 1960s. We're not Jimmy Hoffa. I don't look like Jimmy Hoffa. I've gone on the job sites to organize electricians, and the only person that comes at me with a bat is the foreman on the job, telling me to get the hell off his job site and quit talking to his men. So I just wanted to clarify some things. We're not the ones doing the intimidation, it's the companies. And if you want to look at good examples of it, look at the Amazon organizing effort in Alabama and look at the unfair labor practices that were put on them by the NLRB. They were grossly violating the law, and that's why they had to call for a new election on that one. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your time. Yeah.
Don't go anywhere. You've got some questions. Representative Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Williams, and thank you for shedding light on harassment, coercion, and threats. I've never known labor to be that, and I was trained as an organizer in my late 20s and working with Cesar Chavez and the strawberry workers and SEIU with the home health care workers. We were never trained in that way, and I do not appreciate being put in that light, so I thank you for bringing light to that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Hagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You referenced door knocking. I've done a lot of door knocking during elections, but the door knocking is not the election.
No, it's
elections are secret and private. Why do you oppose workers in their workplace having private, secret ballot elections?
Part of the initial intent for the National Labor Relations Act was if I went to the companies, so workers wanted to organize, they chose a union to join. They don't have to choose a union. They can form their own union if they want to, their own collective. They don't need to have one of us represent them. The reason the elections are put in place is if the employer does not believe reasonable that there is 50% plus one of the workforce that intends to have representation. That's why the election process was put in there. And most of our organizing campaigns that we use for unions, we don't go for 50% because we know if it does go to a secret ballot election that the numbers are going to change, and also the employer can change by hiring 500 new people to dilute the pool. So when we go and actually file our cards to the employer, we typically have between 70 and 80% of the workforce signed up on that. And it's also, if an employer is agreeable to it, why are we taking their right away to voluntarily recognize?
Okay, Chairman Carpenter?
Yes, sir. Just checking if you had the statistics on turnout from elections, secret ballot versus card. What's the average?
You mean turnout like how many win, how many lose?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, it's hard to do with card check because it's voluntary recognition, so it's automatically a success. I don't have any statistics on me as far as how many elections were held last year in the United States under the NLRB and how many won and how many lost, but we can get that information to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Representative Kennard?
Yes.
Actually, if I would, just one moment, sir. I have Dwayne Massengill, who has an actual example of intimidation on the job site. I know he's not signed up, but I was wondering if we could get him in today as well.
Sure, let's get you've got a question first.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Williams. Is it your opinion, your professional opinion, that 362 would run afoul of the NLRA and Georgia would be subject to some costly litigation as a result?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So you want to introduce?
I would like to introduce Dwayne Massengill from Teamsters Rail, and he has an example of actual employer intimidation.
Hi, I'm Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Dwayne Massengill. I'm with the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen. This happened probably in somewhere around the late 80s. I was in my early 20s, 22, 23 years old. I was working for a telecommunication company here in the state. There were some shady things going on there, and a lot of us didn't like what was going on at the company. And so just talking amongst ourselves, no union came in. We were just talking amongst ourselves, hey, maybe we need to unionize. We need to stop this crap. And so we were talking amongst ourselves, and we picked a guy to go find out some information for us. And he talked to the CWA union, and so the ball got rolling. But as far as the union coming in, I never heard from nobody in the union. The only union talk at the shop was amongst ourselves. But you can believe the company was doing some talking. There was a clique that was in tight with the management and all, and they were taking their people out to dinner and alcohol and whining and dining, and so and I got taken out because I was friends with all these people before all this started, and so they took me out, and they were sort of putting me on the spot to say, well, what are you going to do? And I was like, well, I don't know. There's some things not going on that's right around here. So I said, I'm probably going to vote for a union. And so it's 2 days later, I was called into the office, and they were doing this for to the folks that they knew who was not going to side with the company, who was wanting a union. So when they found out that I was, and I got pulled into the office, and I was seeing this happening on a daily basis, People were being pulled in the office 30, 45 minutes at a time, intimidating, threatening you with your job. I mean, all kind of stuff. It's a privately owned company. It was a worldwide company, but privately owned. But the owner came in and threatened to shut the shop down if we unionized. And this was all coming from the company. The union never came in and said a word. The union never took us out to dinner or tried to do anything. But I mean, you know, that's the only intimidation I ever hear is from that side. I've never known.
Okay.
And now I'm a union member with the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen. I work both sides. I would never work anything else but a union job.
Okay, thank you. I've had a pretty lengthy discussion for someone for the bill, and now and a very lengthy from a presenter, both sides. So I wanted to wait until that happened. I don't want us to get the repetition of being judiciary. So if we could stick to the items in the bill, and brevity will be your friend, because we haven't exhausted half the speakers yet. So with that, Ray Kelfani.
Thank you, Chairman, committee members. I'm Ray Califani, Senior Analyst with the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute. Today I'll just give some words just in opposition to SB 362. Companies that value and prioritize flexibility in labor relations may hesitate to invest or expand in Georgia if the proposed legislation restricts their operational freedom. Georgia lawmakers want the state to be a national leader in electric vehicles. Drawing in electric vehicle manufacturers and companies, as part of a EV supply chain, this is something that's very critical in our state. However, this legislation, risks penalizing responsible employers who contribute to the state's economic growth, potentially endangering millions of dollars in investments and the attraction of federal economic development funds. Unions play a critical role in creating quality jobs that pay a fair wage, but beyond that, they have played a critical role in connecting the unique industry-specific training needs of workers into the curriculums of workforce training providers. So by weakening this contributory role as workforce development intermediaries, this jeopardizes career pathways, good jobs, and the high road economic development goals that are essential for Georgia's overall prosperity. Now, committing time and resources to defend this legislation, which almost certainly is going to be taken to court, could deter businesses and hinder economic growth and also waste taxpayer dollars on unnecessary legal disputes. People drive Georgia's economy through their work and community engagement. However, because of anti-union policies that are already in place in our state, we like other low-density union states, have lower median earnings on the states with more unionized workplaces. And according to data from the Economic Policy Institute and the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Georgia is among the bottom 10 states when it comes to the lowest percentage of union coverage. But this also corresponds with being, one of the, bottom 20 states in terms of the lowest median earnings for full-time workers. Georgia employers need to be in the business of creating more quality jobs, and unions are a part of that process. Georgia must also be in the business of reversing a statewide worker retention issue, where too many employers are creating conditions in which workers feel their hands are forced to quit their current jobs. Now, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, for nearly every month since 2013, Georgia has had a higher job quit rate than the national average. Southern states, on average, also have higher job quit rates than the national average, but even even in the exploitative, economic development model that's carried among southern states, Georgia's job quit rates have surpassed the southern state average for the majority of the last decade. Now, research has also shown that efforts to weaken worker security are not only bad for a state's workforce, and not only bad for their health and longevity, but they also weaken its economic competitiveness. And in the comparison of states that have taken steps to weaken worker representation, compared to those who have made steps to either maintain or strengthen it, weak worker representation states like Georgia had 5% less health coverage. This means that employers had a labor pool that was significantly more vulnerable to health risk. Weaker worker representation states had 11% fewer workers with bachelor's degrees or higher, meaning their employers had significantly lesser skilled and a significantly less adaptable pool of workforce talent. 31% of these states had fewer registered apprentices, leaving their employers much less prepared to meet evolving skill demands. Also, weaker worker representation states like Georgia have economic productivity that is 17% lower per worker, demonstrating that broadly, their employers have outputs that are much less efficient and competitive. Also, these states and their state and local governments, likely have greater expenditures because of higher poverty rates, and thereby, have greater shares of households that turn to safety net support programs like SNAP. And also, there's little difference in terms of employment growth compared to states with right to work laws. So I say all that to say, we think about the baseline of where we are. This certainly, can hurt that in terms of bringing in employers that can have, agreements with unions that help to build our current workforce, particularly when we don't have very much at all in place as far as public support in terms of like incumbent worker training. So I'll stop there and I'll be open for any questions.
Okay, thank you. You don't have any. Ed Keynes.
Thanks. Thank the chair, committee members for having us. I'm Ed Keynes. I'm business manager for operating engineers. I'm not going to assume that anyone knows what that is. That's the heavy equipment operators, union version of the heavy equipment operators throughout the Georgia. Our jurisdiction is the northern half of the state. We represent members who are union, obviously, but we also represent companies. So our members include the companies. We have companies, a lot has been said about unionization rates in Georgia and how low union density is in Georgia and how it's much higher in other states. The significance of that, at least from my perspective, is that we have a lot of companies that come in from out of state. There's a lot of work here. Georgia's leading the state.
Hey, pull that mic to you. You're being recorded too. We got to hear you.
Excuse me.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Not used to the microphone, used to levers and heavy equipment. But as I was saying, we're competing. Georgia's the best place to do business. In order to do that effectively, we've got to compete for workers. There are opportunities all across the country, and we're getting companies as well as employees who come into Georgia. And what these employers look for is the easiest way to do business. Many of these employers come from states that have high union density, where the way they do business is lined out according to their union structure. They come here, and if that opportunity isn't here, they may well look elsewhere. And that's one of my main concerns. My goal is to keep my employers satisfied with the workforce and to keep my workforce employed with them. I often look for the unintended consequences, and my concern is that this bill may change the way these employers are able to do business here in Georgia and may encourage them to look elsewhere. That's a concern that really doesn't benefit anyone. A lot has also been said about intimidation. Well, we're 5% of the workforce in Georgia, so we're not intimidating anybody, obviously. And also, I was an organizer, and I know what it's like. We've already heard that you attract far more flies with honey. Also, if one of my organizers intimidates someone, well, they've got to go, because if we organize that company, those are my members, I've got to represent them. So all the rhetoric about intimidation is really just banter. What we want to do is we want to make sure that these employers find Georgia as easy a place to do business as the places that they're coming from. And Georgia has low union density, so we're not leading the charge there. Sometimes it's best that we take marching orders, or at least pattern ourselves after those who have done effective in their respective states. What we do have in terms of intimidation is what's called union busters. When we go to an election, the company then has captive audience opportunities with these employees. That's where the intimidation comes in. We're not able to intimidate them because we're not at their workplace. We're not forcing them into meetings, which can go on for hours and hours and hours. We're not paying them during these organizing campaigns. So we're not in charge of their timelines. When they come to work and the employer tells them that they have a mandatory meeting, well, that's when these union busters who call themselves labor relations specialists or whatever benign terms they can use, that's when the intimidation comes in. And if a bill like this eliminates an employee's opportunity to just seamlessly recognize or become a union member, then that's a disadvantage to those individuals. Our goal is that everyone have an opportunity to be union. And with card check, with voluntary recognition, they have that. Without it, we're just disadvantaging these workers. And that is what I'm against.
Okay. You've got a question, Representative Kennard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. Without breaking any confidences, can you disclose some of the employers that you represent?
Specifically?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, yeah.
That we would be
I could.
familiar with?
Excuse me?
That we would be familiar with.
I don't know how familiar you are with them. It's sort of a niche industry, but Maxim Crane is one of the largest crane companies in the world. We represent them. Keller Foundations, they're also globally we represent them. We represent some of the major players, as well as we have some contractors that have 5 people. So represent large, small, local, global. We represent companies across the board.
Okay. What part?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. I appreciate the information. One question I had just reading through this bill. So again, my understanding of this bill is that on lines 34 to 36, that would be preempted otherwise by federal law. For some of these big companies that do business around the country, would it be your estimation that if they're not able to receive, these benefits under this law, that they would perhaps be provided greater incentive to leave the state of Georgia altogether?
I think so. Oftentimes, the bidding process has razor-thin margins, and I'm not often present for the bidding process, but I do hear the results, and I hear how disappointing it is that they weren't able to win a bid because of something that we often overlook. This, I think, is something that we can see the potential harm to workers, companies, and the state itself. These incentives are significant, and they're obviously going to be considered. And if they're at stake, what would you do? I would find the path of least resistance. I think the easiest way to do it and consider opportunities elsewhere. And that's a concern that I'd rather not have to deal with.
Thank you.
Okay. And then Rep. Holly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for giving your side of the story. I think it's actually been quite powerful. We've noticed that this committee space has actually kind of grown from people who don't ordinarily come into this place. I actually wanted to know, do you think that, we talk about the type of environment inside of the setting, the pressure that it puts on regular employees. Have you seen this where, I guess, to the extent to which it creates an environment, the toxic environment for the workforce, has this been something that you have seen at these companies where you've worked personally? I know you kind of expressed that it creates a bad environment, one where those would-be employees would go to other states in order to go and find that employment. But certainly, have you seen, just from your own standpoint, a level of hostility that's been presented to employees on the ground?
I certainly have. I spent time as an organizer, and I have several stories, and I could go on for quite a while with specific stories.
Let's don't do that.
I won't give tons of examples, but there have been, you know, a lot has been said about the secret ballots, not so secret. You know, these elections, they take place at the workplace, you know, and like I said, we have some small companies, you know, with a dozen people, and everybody knows who's there. When you show up to vote, that can be an intimidating process, you know. We're trying to decide if secret ballot is better than card check. I think both is the way we should go. And I don't think you should eliminate this. And I don't think you should incentivize companies to not recognize these guys' rights. I think we're better off if we give more opportunities to people. I think we're worse off if we eliminate an opportunity. And I heard someone say this looks like a problem, looking for a solution. I think the way the system is set up, where these guys, if they want to be union and they express that through a majority through these authorization cards, I think that right should be afforded to them.
All right, thank you.
And I could give examples if you'd like.
Okay. Email them to me.
Questions.
Mike Thorpe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee members. My name's Mike Tharp, and I'm elected chair for the Communication Workers of America Georgia Political Council. And first, I'd like to say that just a little note of how a good union job brings workers here. My own personal story. My grandfather used to commute from Etowah, Tennessee to Cobb County to work at Lockheed until he was able to afford a house and buy a house behind the Big Chicken. And then my father was able to get a job at Lockheed and was able to work there for 43 years. And I felt like that's why I'm here today, is because that job brought him here. That's my own little personal story. But I also want to bring attention to, as an employee of one of the largest internet providers, I'm really concerned and worry about code section 50-8-8 in this bill that could hurt our future ability to team up with the city and counties to build fiber broadband networks with tax money coming into our state. Our companies teamed up with other companies to bid on projects in other states. And this legislation would make our normal negotiated organizing procedures with our company unavailable if CWA and the company decided these new employees should be part of our union, like when we brought DirecTV and added our wire techs to our company. And when we combined our wireless workers with a company out west. We do not believe the state should tell a private company how they are going to do work with our union. It should be our company and not the state government making the choice on what is best for us. Our company has employees in all 50 states, and our contract in Georgia is part of the 9-state agreement. We need federal labor laws. We need one federal labor law, not 50 different laws for us to keep up, in our opinion. I want to thank the committee for my time, and I appreciate it.
All right, no questions. Walt Peterson.
Good afternoon. I want to thank you all for allowing me to address the committee on Senate Bill 362. Walt Peterson, I'm an organizer for the Atlanta North Georgia Building Trades. It's a lot of words, consists of 18,000 union workers, 19 different local unions, and 300 plus subcontractors and counting. I have an opportunity to be an organizer. I'm nobody in the big scheme of things. It's all those men and women that make up the council, and let me not leave out those employers or partners. I get an opportunity to work in 90 counties in the state of Georgia, get to talk to a lot of folks from those that are tradesmen and women, all the way to those that are business owners that are out there. And some of the business owners convey to me, yeah, I like what you all have to offer. Skilled men and women, apprenticeships that they're going through, a skilled workforce that's coming to the table to build Georgia. As we look around on every street corner, we see construction is booming. Looking out for not just the workers. I'm going to say that again, because a lot of times it's thought of that unions just look out for the workers. We're looking out for the business owners as well, the employers. This bill is not good for workers, it's not good for employers, and it's not good for Georgians. If workers and employers can agree and provide the services needed, it's a win-win for Georgia. It's a win-win for the employee, the union worker, and it's a win-win for the employer. Have I seen the intimidation take place from some employers? Yes, I have. I had an opportunity to be invited on a campaign in South Georgia. Some issues was brought to the plant. Was a battery plant. High lead exposure. Long hours they were working. Unfair labor practices was taking place. They did the vote. They started out with the cars at 75% at least. By the time it went to the table, it was less. Guess what happened? The plant was closed anyway. This bill is bad. The employers that are going to employ the workforce to build these projects that are under construction as we speak, and those that are in the pipeline, those employers need to know that, hey, if those workers decide that they want better training, better safety, better money, because a lot of times we think unions and the first thing we think is more money. We don't think about the safety culture. We don't think about the training. We don't think about the know-how. But that's part of what unions bring to the table. Let's not punish that employer. Let's make it a welcoming place for them. Those businesses that are domestic and foreign. I'm going to say that again. Those businesses that are coming here that are domestic and foreign. I encourage you all, don't punish the employers for being fair to their workers. It's a good thing. It's the right thing. It's the right thing to do. I don't thump the hat being a man of the cloth. Some say it comes out in my speaking. But I do think on scripture from time to time, a lot, not just when I'm standing in front of people, not just on Sunday, not for show either. But I thought on something today prior to coming in here, Matthew 22. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, and mind, and love thy neighbor as thyself. And that man named Jesus went on to say, on those two commandments hang all the laws and the prophets, not the 630-some laws in the Old Testament. So I'm going to move out the way because they say I can talk. Passing this bill, Senate Bill 362, will not show love for thy neighbor. That's the workers, that's the employers, and that's Georgians. Thank you all for allowing me to be able to speak to the committee, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Seth Spann.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, my name is Seth Spann. I am the political director for United Food and Commercials Local 1996. I'm here on behalf of our 18,000 plus members from the carpet capital of the world to the hostess of the South. We also have members in South Carolina, Alabama, and Florida. I come to you in opposition to this bill for the simple fact of necessity or lack thereof. We have the NLRA, federal regulations, laid out with 2 pathways for organization of workers. This bill is the state inserting itself in an arena that the federal government already holds jurisdiction. I won't speak long. I'm not a great orator. You probably hear my voice shaking. But I do want to have all of you keep in mind, we want to be fiscally responsible. This bill goes against that. We know that there's a great chance that this will be challenged if it were accepted and passed. You all are the, I don't know the word, the guardians of the state's funds, our taxpayer dollars. Why waste it? So I'll leave you with this. We organize workers all across this state and all across the United States. Don't make it more difficult for employees here in Georgia and elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Melanie Silverstein, you're the one we've been looking for. Last to speak.
I'll keep it brief, I promise. My name is Melanie Silverstein. I am a labor and political organizer with the IUPAT, the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, primarily representing construction painters, drywall finishers, glazers. Right now, as the law currently stands, employers have 2 options. Those options are protected by the NLRA. You can voluntarily recognize a union or go to a secret ballot election. We've had a lot of discussion about the pros and cons of secret ballot elections, which if we were debating the merits of the NLRA would be relevant, but we're debating SB 362. Right now, if you are in favor of secret ballot elections, great. Employers can choose a secret ballot election. This bill is just seeking to make it harder or get rid of the other option available, which is voluntary recognition. This bill is simply punitive towards those employers who want to make that choice that is federally protected to voluntarily recognize a union. I really appreciate your time and consideration of my testimony and all the other testimony you've heard today. Thank you.
Okay, and earlier, and I'm sorry, I passed over, Representative McLean had a question, and if you want to direct it to a individual or just make a statement.
No, it was to Walt. My question was, and I guess, why I said is that I think about, we always talk about Georgia being the number 1 state to do business, and where I'm at. Oh, Walt did step out there. Well, probably anyone can answer because it, I look at the benefits that union workers have. But I also look at the middle class, and I'm just concerned that if we do some things, this is more of a statement, Mr. Chairman, that we do some things that SB 362 want. I think the middle class will not be a middle class because labor is there to make sure that there are benefits, make sure there's safety on the job. Make sure there's a decent wage for workers, and that workers do have some type of protection. So that's more of a statement, but since Walt did walk out, I did want to ask him about where do you think union workers are in middle class?
Okay. That completes testimony. There's no more questions. I am going to say this because there was a lot of questions about does it infringe on the National Labor Relations Act and would there be a lawsuit? And this was a totally unbiased research this morning. In fact, when I was doing my research, it was actually leaning toward because of that. And so, fortunately, as you know, nonpartisan groups we belong to in the legislature was able to reach out for the Council of Southern States. Tennessee passed a bill. There have been no lawsuits, and a lot of it was hinged on the fact that there are card-only states, and so that has not happened for what it's worth. Okay. Where's my list? 27. Chairman Carpenter.
Make a motion.
State your motion.
Move to pass.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Whip Park, or 18.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was, before that happened, I'm sorry that I had my light on, but I was going to ask you to table SB 362, but I don't know where we are in the parliamentary procedures.
Well, table does take precedence, so we can take up that motion and then take up Carpenter's. Well, I'm going to be fair, so I could rule it out of order, but we're going to take up the motion to table. Is there a second? Second. All right, all those in favor, let's do raise of hand. 7. All those opposed, tabling. All right, that motion fails. We're back to the motion of Carpenter's, and there's been a second. All those in favor of that motion, wait. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much. I was waiting to get back to this question. I've listened to what everybody has had to say, and I guess I'm trying to understand. Most of the time when y'all come to say, I'm really trying to understand what triggered this, and I guess the most alarming is the punitiveness of this legislation. But what triggered this legislation? I've heard the arguments because we've been sitting here for a while, but I'm just trying to really understand it because a lot of times
the governor brought the bill.
Oh, it's his bill.
Yeah.
But how does is it an issue in Georgia? That's what, because you guys keep bringing bills that's not issues in Georgia.
Well, that's for every member, each and every member to decide.
Okay. Well, you did answer my question, so now I know where it came from. I appreciate that.
Okay. All right. So we've got the question on the floor. All those in favor, raise your hand. So we have 8-4. All those against? Motion carries 8-7. Do you have something else?
Question. So when you all are losing, do y'all like call and get other people to come to the meetings?
Who knows? All right. At that, we are adjourned. The rest of y'all can leave. Hey, are you presenting instead of Ms. Cooper? Okay.
Well, I'm staying because, I ain't won nothing today, so I got something for you.
All right. Sorry for those who are anxious to get to dinner. You don't look like Ms. Cooper, so tell us. This is House Bill, it's quiet down, 1125. Go ahead. Try it again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, like I'm Bad Rash, I'm back again. Here to present to you LC 550119 in place of Chairwoman Cooper, who is, I believe, wrapping up the healthcare meeting now. I'll share just my personal story and why I'm second signer on here. As many of you probably know, I have a child. His name is Chase. He is awesome and a blessing in our life, and he was born with Down syndrome. And my goal for Chase is all the money that we're investing in him and all the energy right now in his life, that he becomes a taxpayer in about 7 to 10 years. And so and when he does become a taxpayer, he's going to be contributing back via a job that makes him feel happy, healthy, and whole. And that's the genesis of this bill here. House Bill 1125. There's an interesting kind of carve out that we have right now. It's a 14C waiver that allows certain entities to pay people with special needs below minimum wage. Now, Charlotte will share with you, I struggled a lot with this bill at the start, and I'll tell you why I'm comfortable now for a few reasons. So, folks with special needs, to qualify for Social Security, you can't have more than $2,000 under your name, meaning parent special needs. We got to do all kinds of tricks and shell games to kind of move that money around. This does not impact their ability to qualify for that. There's also certain things in terms of how much you can earn in a given year. This does not impact that either. And so does not get rid of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid benefits. What I was also afraid of is, some people, especially with severe disabilities, they can't produce a product that is at minimum wage that can compensate a company fairly. And so is that going to do away with jobs? Like I said, at the end of the day, I want my son to have a job. And is that job going to be there if folks have to pay above minimum wage? Well, this only applies to 8 community rehabilitation programs that currently have that certificate in the state. So a very small group of folks, about 245 individuals. Most of the rehabilitation programs have already gotten rid of that waiver, have gone up to minimum wage. And in fact, there's a grant program in place to help the remainder get up to minimum wage. So as we've addressed maternal mortality and all sorts of things to put people first here in the state, this is another bill that really carries the day and plants a flag to say, you know what, we speak for those who may not be able to speak for themselves. And so with that, I'm going to let Charlotte to my left here ring in with the Georgia Council of Developmental Disabilities. She's been a big advocate and help on this, and she'll correct anything I may have gotten wrong.
You did amazing.
I did amazing. Well, happy to stand for any questions that the committee might have.
So I do, and I talked to Arthur at length of this. I have spent tens of thousands with Pineland Mental Health Services, and I did pay sub-minimum wage at their request, because if I hadn't, I could have never used them. It would have, a job that cost me $2,000 would have cost me $20,000. So I would pay the rate based on the stopwatch, percentage-wise, and then I'd give them a donation. So you said it's down to 7 organizations. So would Pineland, that's in the BHDBD, are they, I'm assuming they're not part of the 7, but are they part of the bigger scope? You see what I'm asking?
I can speak to this.
Okay.
Sure. So Pineland is part of the 8 that are still holding the certificates, and they're actually in the process of transitioning out. So they're already almost there, transitioning out of using 14.
But that won't cost them opportunities because, okay. And
No,
why do you
sir.
think so?
Because, here, I'll speak in the mic. Because of this grant, so the SWITC grant that the governor applied for, we're one of 14 states that received this grant. SWITC.
So it would subsidize the pay?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Okay. That was back in the day when we were printing 500-page book. I had to print 500 copies of page 1, put that paper back in the press. Things of technology has changed a lot.
I just want to clarify. Sorry, I want to make sure I'm super clear. It's more a transition into competitive employment. So it's not necessarily that we're subsidizing the wages as they stand, but we're helping the individuals get real jobs.
Well, thank you for that.
Yes,
and Representative Carter. You get to be first this time.
Thank you. And I think that you may have helped me a little bit because I'm having a little pause knowing that Georgia's minimum wage is $5.15.
Well, it's really not, but go ahead.
Well, Georgia's minimum wage is $5.15.
But federal.
No, the federal is $7.25, but Georgia is $5.15. So I heard you just say about the subsidies, so they helped me a little bit. But you're saying that.
So right now, on average, folks with special needs under this waiver are earning $3.34 an hour.
Wow. Okay.
That's what we're trying to change.
So we're trying to bring it up.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
But back to your previous point, an employer cannot pay somebody $5 because federal, and the reason we haven't changed minimum wage is because federal supersedes it. So we just kind of leave it there on the books. Chairman Carpenter.
At the proper time, Chairman.
All right. Let me let my vice chair want to weigh in.
I was going to make a motion.
Well, we got two people fighting over a motion, so
Give it to him. He's better
all
looking
right.
than I am.
Okay.
Make
Go
a
ahead.
motion.
We have a motion do pass. We got a second. All in favor? Is there any discussion? Means we're ready to get out of here. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Congratulations. We
Thank you, Mr.
are
Chairman.
adjourned for real.
Thank you.